Thank you, Rich, and thank you, Ambassador Hussein. I just wanted to say, it occurred to me as you were speaking that we've had the Abrahamic trifecta at IDC to speak. We've had David Saperstein, Sam Brownback, and now yourself, Ambassador Hussein. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for your wonderful words. Our final speaker this evening is a friend and someone I very much admire. Every once in a while, I'm mistaken for someone who's very courageous and goes to the most dangerous places in the world. And I quickly correct those people and say, no, it's Jason Jones that you're thinking of. Jason is a real hero, somebody who lives every single day in a very courageous way. The work that he began many years ago. Jason is a filmmaker, sure, and Jason is an Army veteran, sure, and Jason is a marvelous speaker on the subject of human rights. He's been all over the world, from Africa to the Middle East, and even here in America, helping those who are very much in need, the weakest among us, those in need of advocacy. Just to give you an example, I reached out to some friends in government and in other places several months ago to say, I think I know the last person who's getting people out of Afghanistan and who has not given up. And to give you an example of that, he was recently in an Uber having a conversation about rescuing people. And the Uber driver turned around and said, a member of my family, a young woman, is going to be forced into a marriage with an Islamist group. Can you help? And he said, not only yes, can we help, that man and his family are here today, and that's just who Jason is. So I don't want to belabor too long here our final speaker, but I would just say that this is a human being you're about to hear from who's a great inspiration and who really puts his money where his mouth is. And so please join me in welcoming Jason Jones.
Clearly, Andrew only talks to my publicist and not my wife or my staff. And you really shouldn't say I go to dangerous places with my wife here, Andrew, because she doesn't know that. And I want to say that I know most of you probably don't know who I am, but I do know who so many of you are. And Katrina Lantos, you're such a graceful, courageous, wonderful woman who beautifully reflects your father. And you're someone I greatly admire. Ambassador, thank you for your fortitude and your courage. And I remember first meeting Andrew maybe around 2009 in Los Angeles. He came to our offices. We were working on a movie, The Stoning of Soraya M. I don't know how many of you saw our film. Hey, Mike, good to see you, another hero of mine, The Stoning of Soraya M. When he shared the vision for an organization that became In Defense of Christians. I don't need to tell you this because all of you know this. When you do humanitarian work, there's always Palm Sunday. It's when the cameras show up. It's when the donors show up. It's when people tell you how great you are. But then we quickly learn that Palm Sunday is always followed by Good Friday. Sadly, with our work in the Middle East, I don't feel we ever had the opportunity. Did I miss Palm Sunday? Did we have a Palm Sunday for the Christians in the Middle East? Did I miss it? I don't know. Did we have it? That's a real honest question. We didn't have it, did we? We had it in Ukraine. We even had it in Afghanistan for 4 weeks, 3 weeks. But we never, ever had that for Christians in the Middle East. And we're coming up on Christmas, and my favorite images I'm Catholic, of our Blessed Mother at Christmas is with Jesus draped on her lap. Because what it reminds me of is the Pietà. And we all know the Pietà. It's of our Lord, the second person of the Trinity, lifeless, draped across a creature's lap. The creature is his mother. And to me, the Pietà best represents our work. That we are the weak ones who have the privilege of serving those who are very strong, but they're vulnerable, and they've been placed in impossible situations. And that's what it is. It is our work to do. It is to stand with the most vulnerable people in the world when no one else will. The work that you all do is the most important work on earth. But I think tonight more represents the cross than it does Palm Sunday. There's a handful of us here. There's a handful of us here. How many of you knew Dr. Nahum Ghaffari? Did anyone know Dr. Ghaffari? She was a Swedish heart surgeon. She was Kurdish, Muslim. But if you met her and you were Christian, she would say she's Muslim. If you're Muslim, she'd say you're Yazidi. If you're Jewish, she'd always tell you she was the other of what you were. That most people never knew what she really was. And she didn't do this like in, nice restaurants in New York. She did this in Mosul during the Battle of Mosul. She's a very unique person. She went from Sweden to Iraq. She was a Kurd who was a child, was a refugee, and was raised in Sweden. And she went to Iraq to allow herself to be captured by ISIS so she could treat Yazidis and others. And one day there was a riot when we were in Iraq because as a doctor, she had discovered that some children were being hurt, young girls were being hurt inside the camps. And as a doctor, she discovered this and she brought it to people's attention. And so there was a riot and they destroyed an ambulance that she built, that she purchased with her own money. She wasn't a wealthy woman. So I quoted René Girard to her. I said, Dr. Ghaffari, the French anthropologist René Girard said, to serve the vulnerable truly is to become as vulnerable as they are. And Dr. Ghaffari said, that's true, Jason. And just because we're in solidarity with the vulnerable, we have no right to expect their gratitude. And we have no right to expect them to be in solidarity with us. And she didn't say this with any sort of malice or bitterness. She was being very sincere. On my Facebook memories recently, there was an image of Dr. Ghaffari and I in Iraq, and I'm from Hawaii, and I gave her 2 prayer cards. And I'd forgotten I gave her these 2 prayer cards. I gave her St. Damien of Molokai and Mother Mary Ann Cope. They cared for lepers. And St. Damien died of leprosy. Dr. Ghaffari, while serving the Yazidis in Iraq, trying to reunite Yazidi women with their ISIS children, died of COVID. And it meant so much to me to think that, she had that prayer card of St. Damien, and she was a saint. She was a saint. Now, I don't want to share this story with you, but Andrew asked me to, so I will. I want to share 2 stories with you. One I was going to share with you, one Andrew wants me to share with you. I was recently being interviewed, and when I'm asked a question, I always want to dissemble, so I trained myself not to, Don't dissemble, listen, and give an honest answer as clearly as possible. And I should not have done this time. It was at the March for the Martyrs. And she asked the question, and I'll give you the answer. I don't really remember specifically what the question was. But I remember she asked it, and I immediately began to cry. So I hope I don't cry. Memory is of our senses, do you know what sense is most closely connected with memory? Smell. And that's the sad part of the story. During the Battle of Mosul, I was traveling with the Peshmerga, and we were documenting the plight of Christians and Yazidis and others. And as we were rolling through where a battle had just taken place, I said reflexively, just not thinking out loud, I said, that is the worst smell I have ever smelled in my life. And embarrassed, one of the Peshmerga officers said, that's cordite. So I'm an infantryman, I know cordite. I'm not talking about the cordite. I said, that is the worst smell I've ever smelled in my life. And the officer said, apologetically, I'm sorry, sir, that's burning flesh. There were Yazidi children and women in that building, and they destroyed it, and they booby-trapped it, and they're still in there, and they're burning. And it was the worst It doesn't leave you. In fact, 10 days later, I was back home in Honolulu in a Starbucks. Now, Starbucks in Honolulu is probably the furthest place in the world from a war zone. I walked in, there's beautiful kids doing their homework, and little entrepreneurs, changing business cards, and the coffee house music. And the best smell in the world is what? I think it's coffee. And so I had a panic attack and never had one of those before. I locked myself in the bathroom. But I want to share the other end of that story. I had camera crews with me. And the Yazidi fathers would follow behind. I know some of you probably experienced this, and Mike, and some of you others have been there. And Andrew, the fathers were following behind the Peshmerga, hoping to see it was their daughters that were being brought back as they were rescuing these girls. And at one moment, I realized out of the corner of my eye, I was seeing probably the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. And this was probably 20 minutes after I smelled and witnessed the worst thing in my life. The Peshmerga were bringing back some girls, and this man realized he was looking at his daughter, and this daughter realized that she was looking at her father. Now, I had camera crews with me, and my first thought was, get the cameras. I ordered them not to film this. I did not want to invade this with cameras, and I myself did not even want to look upon. I don't know why I thought this. I'm always thoughtful, as I think we all are. We don't want to exploit the people we serve. And it's always a very thin line, isn't it? We need to tell stories when we run our influence campaigns to serve them. But how do you do that in a way that's not exploitative? And this is the biggest challenge so many times in the work we do. Gerard called it victimism, where you're actually feigning concern for the vulnerable, for wealth or power or prestige. People tell you how great you are so you can get more donations. This is something I'm always very careful and thoughtful, and I try to be introspective. I ordered the cameras to point away, and I looked away. And I looked at these Peshmerga. And so I looked away from this father and his daughter, and I looked at these men. And it was that moment I just thanked God. I said, Lord, how in the world do I have the privilege to look at these men, to breathe the same air as these men, to stand on the same dirt as these men? Because if not for these guys that look like they may run a body shop in Queens with that old truck and that old rifle, if not for these men, this little girl would be destroyed. His father's heart would be broken. They were the only thing that stood between a violent ideology and total genocide. But that's what I feel like when I look at you. We're Democrats, we're Republicans, but we're all in this room, we're different. Even my wife, I'm a Republican. I can tell you, I know she donates to Democrats. I see it. I see it. I know. She does. You know what she'll tell you? I make her do it, so it's not on my record. Like, we want to give to this Democrat. You do it. I can't do it. But we're different. We transcend ideology, we transcend our faiths, we transcend party. These are the folks that God has touched us for maybe our experiences that I had as a young soldier or whatever touched you that compels you to order your life to stand between the violent and the vulnerable. And you are very influential. In Ecclesiastes, Solomon says, I looked all over the world, and what do I see? Do you guys remember this? What do I see? Oppression. And on the side of the oppressor, it's the saddest line in the Bible. What is on the side of the oppressor? Power. But who is on the side of the vulnerable? It's you. And I thank God for you. Now, the story that I was going to share, and I'll be brief, I want us to remember there are a lot of vulnerable people still in Afghanistan. We don't know how many SIVs. The Hazara are suffering. The widows and orphans of our Afghan allies, men who died fighting shoulder to shoulder with us, their wives, their children are starving and freezing to death. And I'm sorry to say this in front of you. We need to remember them. We need to serve them. When, in the confusion of our withdrawal, I don't know how I went a month putting together databases with thousands of people, organizing photos in an Excel file. And my wife kind of caused me trouble because one night she was watching Friends or something, and I was next to her on my laptop organizing passport photos into an Excel file. And she said, "Honey, I'm scrolling through pages and pages and pages of passports." And she's looking. She says, "How can you do this? How can you look at all of these photos of these children and these women? Do you know I'd went a month of organizing these and I didn't look at a single photo?" Subconsciously, I trained myself, I guess, don't look at their photos. So that night I said, I'm going to go in my office and I'm going to look at every single photo. And I did. And I thank God I did that night because I might have quit. But I'm not going to quit. And I know IDC is not going to quit. You're truly one of the most precious and important organizations in the world. And I'm so grateful for you and all of you that showed up today. You took the time out of your busy schedule in this time of the year, which is the busiest time of the year for so many of us. I'm so grateful for you to make the time to come here. Because I know you are here because you value IDC, but more importantly, you are here because you value the people that IDC serves. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. The stories of your experiences are incredibly moving. It's not the first time I've heard it. I was at the March for the Martyrs, and it moved me. And tonight, the second time, it was no different. So thank you for sharing that and bearing your heart for us. I don't want to belabor remarks too long or extend this too long, but again, thank you for joining us this evening. This cause is bigger than any one of us, and we thank you for your support. Please enjoy the snacks, the food, and the bar is waiting. So thank you.